Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. Good to see you all. Tonight, we're continuing with our study of Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Tonight, we're going to begin chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita. The chapter is entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. So, as we've been describing, in chapter 3, we heard about the subject of Karma Yoga, acting in Krishna consciousness. Chapter 4, which we just finished, spoke about transcendental knowledge, which is called Jnana Yoga. And we've been speaking quite a lot about the fusing or the synthesis of karma and jnana. Karma means to act, jnana means with knowledge. We must act with knowledge, with transcendental knowledge. And if we do this, then our life becomes successful. So Krishna will continue to describe this subject matter in chapter 5. So we'll continue our study. And if you have any questions or any comments as we go, then please ask. So chapter 5, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all, you asked me to renounce work, and then you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me, definitely, which of the two is more beneficial?" So Burrajan Prabhu writes in his commentary on chapter 5, in Surrender Unto Me, Arjuna is still confused, though he has heard transcendental knowledge from Krishna. In text 16 to 18 of the 4th chapter, Krishna glorified jnana and spoke of action in inaction and inaction in action. In text 41, Krishna glorified both jnana and renunciation. Then, in text 42, he again ordered Arjuna to fight. Therefore, chapter 5 opens with a question similar to the one Arjuna asked at the beginning of chapter 3, which is better, work or renunciation of work? So, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, in this 5th chapter, Krishna says that work in devotional service is better than dry mental speculation. Devotional service is easier than the latter because, being transcendental in nature, it frees one from reaction. So, the basic principle, the basic instruction which Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, because he speaks of two paths. One is active and the other one is inactive. So there are two paths. And in spiritual life, these are the two paths which are often spoken of. The inactive path and the active path. Now, Krishna explains in the beginning of chapter 3 that the soul cannot stop from being active at any moment. The soul is active by nature. It is dynamic. It is not static. It is ecstatic. That is the nature of the soul. So we can't stop doing anything, even for a moment. At every moment of our existence, we're either breathing or we're thinking or we're doing something, right? We can't be inactive at any time. It's not possible. So, because that is our nature, Krishna says, be active, but be active for him. In other words, do service, but do service dedicated to him. That's karma yoga, right? Karma means activity. Yoga means to connect, to unite. So do your activity for the pleasure of Krishna. This is called karma yoga. Acting with knowledge. Jnana. Divya Gyan means transcendental knowledge. We act with spiritual understanding that we are the soul, Krishna is the supreme soul, and our activities are meant to be for his pleasure. That's called bhakti yoga. So this is the path that Krishna recommends again and again within the Bhagavad Gita. Some people, they can stick to the inactive path, which means they just meditate or study. They're inactive. They can sit for hours on end. They can engage in meditation, study, chanting, so on. Some people can do that, but most cannot. You know, when I was younger, you know, I reflect on this sometimes. When I was younger, I could, you know, do hours of study and hours of chanting. But as I get older, I find it more difficult for different reasons to hold the concentration for long periods of time. So I have to find a balance between inactivity, such as chanting or studying, and active work, where I'm doing something, active service to Krishna. So there has to be a balance. Each individual is different, and everyone has to find their own balance, what works for them. Prabhupada further says in the purport that by simultaneously stressing the importance of both work in devotion and in action, in knowledge, Krishna has perplexed Arjuna and confused his determination. Then Prabhupada further says, fruitive activities seeking sense gratification are cause for material bondage. One is considered a failure as long as he makes no inquiry about his real identity. Although the mind may be engrossed in fruitive activities and influenced by ignorance, one must develop a love for devotional service to Krishna. Only then can one get out of material bondage. So the point is simple, right? If we don't act for the pleasure of Krishna, we will fall into ignorance. So as the Bhagavad Gita progresses more and more, Krishna will emphasize this more and more. Do your work, but do it for him. And in this way, you remain free from bondage, as Krishna spoke in the previous chapter. You perform akarma. Akarma means activity which is free from reaction, which is what we're aiming for. Devotional service means the reaction you get is spiritual. The reaction you get is coming from Krishna himself. It is his reciprocation for our bhakti or our devotional service. That is what Krishna reciprocates with. So this is what we're aiming for as devotees, to serve Krishna, to give pleasure to Krishna. Okay. Text number 2. The personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotion, devotional service, is better than renunciation of work. Prabhupada says in the purport that jnana is not sufficient for liberation. One has to act in the status of spirit soul. Otherwise, there is no escape from material bondage. Without Krishna consciousness, mere renunciation of fruitive activities does not actually purify the heart of a conditioned soul. Therefore, action in Krishna consciousness is always superior to renunciation, which always entails a risk of falling. So, what Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gita is the most simple and sublime path of Bhakti Yoga. Why is Bhakti Yoga the superior path and the superior form of engagement for the soul? Because Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. Rishikesha. To use our senses in the service of the master of the senses. Most of us cannot control our senses easily. Right? It's not easy to control the senses because the senses are very strong. Right? Particularly the tongue, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. The tongue is very hard to control. We like to speak all sorts of things, and we like to taste all sorts of things. So that is the nature of the senses. They're very hard to control. So what is the best way of controlling them? If one simply attempts, someone thinks, well, my senses, they want to enjoy, they want to be engaged, they want to interact with the sense objects. If we think like that we want to engage with the sense objects, spiritual life becomes very difficult. It becomes difficult to advance in Krishna consciousness if your senses are always trying to engage in sense gratification. So what Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gita is param drishtva nivartate. Give the senses a superior engagement. Give them a superior satisfaction. And what is that? That is Bhakti Yoga. That is engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses. In that way, you're using your senses, you're satisfying your senses, but they're becoming purified by being engaged in Krishna's service. So all of us need this type of engagement. Right? We need to engage our senses in Krishna's service. Prabhupada then says in the purport, one who knows that everything is Krishna's property is always situated in renunciation. Since everything belongs to Krishna, everything should be employed in the service of Krishna. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Uchite. This is the philosophy of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, of Vaishnavism. That our senses should be used in the service of Krishna. And those things in this world that we can use in the service of Krishna, we should use them in Krishna's service to purify ourselves. This is called Yukta Vairagya. This is perfect renunciation. So we all like to eat, as Prabhupada explains, palatable foodstuffs. We all like to eat nice things. Right? I want to eat this, I want to eat that. I want to taste nice things. The tongue is voracious. It is the most difficult of all senses to control. So we all like to eat nice things. However, we purify that sense by only eating things which have been first offered to Krishna. That's how we purify the tongue, the sense of taste. Right? Everything must be first offered to Krishna. If we do this, if we offer everything to Krishna and we taste the remnants, which is called prasad, we purify the senses. Tat paratwena nirmalam. We become purified by that process. So this is what every devotee, this is the science, this is the art of Krishna consciousness. Right? We have to learn to engage the senses in the service of the master of the senses. That's how we purify the senses. Text number 3. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated or mighty armed. So, Prabhupada says within the purport, knowledge that one is one in quality yet different in quantity is correct transcendental knowledge, leading one to become full of, having nothing to aspire or lament over. There is no duality in his mind because whatever he does for Krishna. Thus he is liberated even in this material world. So it's a very interesting verse. Krishna is talking about the platform of a Jivan Mukta. Jivan Mukta means one who is liberated from bondage in the material energy. Krishna says, one who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. This is what we're aiming for. This is called sannyas. Right? Sannyas means the stage of life where one neither hates nor desires, right? Fruitive activities. He doesn't want to enjoy the fruits. He doesn't want to enjoy the sense objects. He doesn't hate, he doesn't despise them, but he's also not desiring to enjoy them. This is the state of consciousness which Krishna is asking us to come to. We don't despise. We're not repulsed by the material world, but we're also not desiring to enjoy it separately from Krishna. Right? That's the state of liberation that we're meant to come to as devotees. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated. So becoming free from duality, not easy to do. If you're in a male body, generally the male form is attracted to the female form, and vice versa. One in the female body is generally attracted to the male form. Not always. You know, these days people are attracted to the same sex, but the basic principle is the same. We see in duality. We don't see the spiritual spark or the spiritual essence within us. We see the outer covering of the soul. We see in terms of duality. We see the body. We identify with the body. We covet or desire to enjoy other people's bodies. And therefore, as long as we have this consciousness, we can't become fully self-realized. So that is the consciousness that we have to transcend. As Prabhupada mentions in the purport, we have to transcend this type of consciousness. Right? Krishna mentions in this verse, rise above duality. Give up the duality of trying to enjoy separately from Krishna. Text number 4. Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the result of both. So it's a very interesting point that Krishna is speaking of here. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, the real student of Sankhya philosophy finds the root of the material world, Vishnu, and then in perfect knowledge engages himself in the service of Vishnu. Therefore, in essence, there is no difference between Sankhya and devotional service because the aim of both is Vishnu. So Krishna is now explaining that the result of Sankhya yoga or the result of Bhakti yoga, are the same. So what is Sankhya yoga? Sankhya, the word literally means to count or to analyze. In other words, you make an analysis through study, through contemplation. You make an analysis of this material energy, this material world. So you think to yourself and you analyze, I am not this material body, which is made of the 5 Mahabhutas, right? Earth, water, fire, air, ether. I'm different from that. I'm not any of these elements. I'm not the body. I am the Atma. So this is Sankhya or analysis. I am not the senses, the working senses or the knowledge acquiring senses, right? So you detach yourself from your senses. You're seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, hearing, the knowledge acquiring senses and the working senses. You detach yourself from them. Then you understand, I'm not these things. I'm also not the sense objects. They are different from me. So you detach yourself from all of these things. And I'm not the mind. I'm not the intelligence. I'm not the ego. I am beyond these things. So this is called Sankhya yoga. That you analyze, you count the different elements of the material world, and you detach yourself from these. So Krishna is explaining here, and Prabhupada is explaining that in this material world, to get out of the material world, you need to engage yourself in one of these systems of purification. Sankhya yoga, where you analyze everything and you detach yourself by observation, that I'm not this material energy, I'm separate, and then you liberate yourself. Or through bhakti yoga, through engaging your senses, not in sense gratification, but in the service of God, the service of Krishna. So it is explained that both will lead to the same result, the same goal. Because by Sankhya Yoga, you understand I am not the body, I am the soul. I must engage in the service of Krishna. That is the occupation of the soul. And that's what Bhakti Yoga is already doing. So both are leading to the same goal. That's why they can consider to be supportive, interrelated. They help us to achieve the goal. Okay, text number 5. One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. So, Prabhupada says in the purport, in Sankhya, one has to become detached from matter. And in the devotional yoga process, one has to attach himself to the work of Krishna consciousness. Detachment from matter and attachment to Krishna are one and the same. So it's the same thing. Right? It's the same thing. That once we detach ourselves from matter and we understand our spiritual essence, then what will we do? We will serve Krishna, hopefully. Right? Sometimes the impersonalist doesn't. Prabhupada calls impersonalism Srila Prabhupada calls impersonalism the last snare of Maya. Right? It is the last snare of Maya, of the illusory energy. Because you might understand this world is false. You understand that. This world is material, it's false. Right? You get that understanding. However, although you understand this world is false, but you deny or you don't accept the authority of Krishna, and you don't want to engage in his service. So because you don't want to engage in Krishna's service, you're materialistic in your consciousness. And you can then merge into the impersonal feature of God, what we call Brahmajyoti. I don't want to use my senses in the service of Krishna. I understand everything in this world is false. So then what is my destination? I have to merge into, I have to become God. I don't want to serve God, I want to become God. Last snare of Maya, the last state of illusion. Because it's not the constitutional position of the jiva, the soul, to act like this. So generally, when one understands this world is false and that he is spirit, generally one will understand, okay, my purpose is to serve Krishna, to serve God. And then he engages his senses in the service of the master of the senses and becomes purified and becomes liberated. Text number 6. Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service, of the Lord cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. So Prabhupada says in the purport, the Vaishnava sannyasis who are engaged in devotional service are happy in the discharge of their transcendental duties, and they have the guarantee of ultimate entrance into the kingdom of God. So Srila Prabhupada explains that a Vaishnava sannyasi, they are the gurus of society, right, of the Vaishnava community. The sannyasi is automatically the guru of all the other varnas, all the other ashrams. What is the sannyasi's qualification? Right? What is the sannyasi's what is his position? Right? The sannyasi's position, right, is to instruct everyone else within the Varnashram system. Why? Because the sannyasi has understood the goal of life. The Gaudiya sannyasis, the Vaishnava sannyasis, they understand this material world is false, right? They're detached from it. And they've taken up the process of devotional service. They're fully engaging their mind, their body, their words in the service of Krishna. And therefore, because they're doing that, they're guaranteed to enter back into the kingdom of God. And they can take everyone who follows their instructions back to the kingdom of God. Right? That is their exalted position. Prabhupada explains, Mayavadi sannyasis engaged in the studies of Sankhya cannot relish the transcendental service of the Lord. So they can't understand the transcendental service or the transcendental nature of Krishna, of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya says that even if we see the face of a Mayavadi, we should jump into the Ganges with all of our clothes on to purify ourselves. Right? And Lord Chaitanya warns, do not hear Mayavad, impersonalistic philosophy. Don't hear it because it will damage you. It will contaminate your consciousness. So we have to be very careful about hearing from the Mayavadis because they don't understand. They will not surrender to Krishna. They engage the senses in the service of the master of the senses. Rather, they think this world is Maya, it's illusion. So engaging in any activity is just another feature of Maya, even devotional service. Therefore, better to refrain from activity. Right? It's all illusion. That's their mentality. So obviously, as devotees, we're very careful about not associating closely, especially when you're a new devotee. Very careful about associating with Mayavadis, impersonalists. Right? Because their association can lead one astray. It can confuse one and make one think the goal of life is to become God as opposed to serve God. Okay. Text number 7. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Prabhupada explains in the purport that because one who works in Krishna consciousness is servant to all, he is very dear to everyone. And because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there is no chance of his being deviated from Krishna. So, it's easy for someone whose mind is always engaged in the service of Krishna to become liberated. It's actually, once you fall into this material world, it's actually difficult to purify the mind because we identify with the mind so much. And when we identify with the mind, we become entangled in this world. So one who is advancing in Krishna consciousness detaches himself from the mind and purifies the mind by thinking of service to Krishna constantly. That's how we overcome the dictates of the mind within this world. Prabhupada then says in the purport, a person of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. One may ask, why was Arjuna offensive in battle to others? Wasn't he in Krishna consciousness? Arjuna was only superficially offensive because all the persons on the battlefield would continue to live, as the soul cannot be slain. Arjuna was not really fighting at all. He was simply carrying out the orders of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. So, one who is spiritually realized, he treats all others with respect because his mind is not contaminated. He sees everyone as being connected to Krishna and he treats everyone respectfully. That is actually the vision of the self-realized personality. Okay. Text number 8 and 9. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. So, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, a Krishna conscious person is never affected by the actions of the senses. He cannot perform any act except in the service of Krishna because he knows he is the eternal servitor of Krishna. Prabhupada explains in his commentaries in the Bhagavad Gita that the senses are sometimes compared to serpents, right? A serpent is dangerous, sapa, a snake. A serpent is dangerous. We if you catch the snake and remove the fangs, it's no longer a concern. Right? It can't hurt you. It can't poison you. Similarly, when the senses, it is explained, Prabhupada explains that if your senses are not used in sense gratification, if you have control of your senses and you only use your senses in the service of Krishna, it is like when the fangs are taken out of the serpent's mouth. There is no danger from the senses. Our senses cannot harm us when we use them in the service of Krishna. So that is the process of bhakti. The process of bhakti is to use your senses in the service of Krishna. Then you don't have to worry about the negative effects of the senses. Text number 10. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So Prabhupada says in the purport that a person in Krishna consciousness acts according to the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and should therefore be engaged in the service of Krishna. So this is explained within this verse. One who engages his senses in Krishna's service is not affected by sinful reaction, just as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So this is Jivan Mukta. Jivan Mukta means you engage in the service of Krishna, you engage your senses in the service of Krishna. So by engaging your senses in Krishna's service, you become purified. And at that time, you don't have to worry about sinful reactions. You become liberated from the effects, from the bondage of this material world. People who do not engage their senses in the service of Krishna, they are affected by the contamination of this material world. And they can't rise above the effects of the modes of material nature. So Krishna is explaining to us to use our senses always in the service of Krishna. Text number 11. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. So Prabhupada says in the purport that when one acts for the satisfaction of the senses of Krishna, any action, whether of the body, mind, intelligence, or senses, is purified of material contamination. He is one with Krishna, and he is devoid of the false ego that leads one to believe he is the body, etc. This is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. So Krishna is basically speaking about the state of consciousness of a sannyasi. A sannyasi means someone who has the body, the mind, the words engaged in the service of Krishna. It means Jivan Mukta, means one who is liberated. Right? He doesn't have any attachment to this world. He is not attracted to enjoying the senses separately from Krishna in this world. This is the state of consciousness that we need to come to as devotees. Right? This takes time to cultivate this kind of consciousness. It's not easy to rise to this level of consciousness. So as devotees, we need to focus on this type of consciousness. And we pray that one day we can attain this level of consciousness, because it's not easy. Yeah, I might have mentioned before that, when I first became a devotee, I took to the practice of devotional service and chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra 16 rounds a day. And when you first come, Krishna gives you spurti. Spurti means like a taste. He gives you so much. You're in bliss. When you first come to Krishna consciousness, that's how I experienced my beginning of Krishna consciousness. It was blissful. Many others have experienced this as well. So we first come and we engage ourselves in Krishna service, and we feel very blissful. So I remember thinking to myself, if I keep going on this trajectory, if I keep engaging in devotional service and experience, I'll be a pure devotee within 2 years. I remember thinking that in the very beginning. Because I was getting so much taste, so much pleasure, so much realization. I thought, if I just keep going like this, in 2 years, I'll be a pure devotee. And now, after many years, I've been practicing bhakti yoga, devotional service, trying to serve Krishna, Guru and Krishna. And I realize that I'm a long way from becoming a pure devotee of Krishna. The senses are very powerful. Maya is very strong. We lack sincerity. And therefore, it's not easy to rise to this platform of the mind, the body, and the words being always engaged in Krishna's service. It takes practice. But we have to get enough taste that we continue year after year to gradually purify ourselves so that we can attain Krishna's service. And the last verse for tonight is text number 12. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Prabhupada says in the purport, a person in Krishna consciousness is attached to Krishna, whereas a person in bodily consciousness is attached to the results of his activities. The person who is attached to Krishna and works for him only is certainly liberated, and he has no anxiety over the results of his work. This is the platform of peace and fearlessness. Prabhupada then says in the purport, in the Bhagavatam, the cause of anxiety over the result of an activity is one's functioning in the conception of duality. That is, without knowledge of the absolute truth, Krishna. So there is no peace, true peace, lasting peace, if you don't engage in Krishna's service. Even a Mayavadi who may attain the Brahma Jyoti, which for a devotee is a hellish destination, because there's no opportunity to serve Krishna. Even a Mayavadi who attains that, he has to eventually come back to this material world because his senses need engagement. You could not be satisfied and happy in an inactive situation. Therefore, you have to engage your senses in the service of Krishna. That is the process of purification. So I'll stop here for tonight. Does anyone have any questions or any comments on anything that we have discussed? So next week we will continue with our study of chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you all for coming. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. See you next week. Hare Krishna.